I must respond before I go into my cultural obligations and the context of my presentation to what Candy's saying. Firstly, thank you for those words and the extra little bit that he adds in my bio. Nevertheless, I feel quite honoured to be here today, and certainly to give this group a progress report in terms of what's happening in treaty in South Australia. In attending to my cultural obligations, I firstly thank you, Candy, for the kind welcome to the country, and I acknowledge also and pay my respect to all Ghana people. I also extend my respect and acknowledge the cultural authority of Aboriginal elders and leaders that are in the room here today. Having done that, it's ironical that I'm here today because I'm in recovery mode myself with a health condition. So today's my first day back at work after having a bit of an operation last week, which tends to happen to some of us at our age, and when you're carrying a bit of extra pudding, it doesn't help, I'm going to tell you. But nevertheless, I'm here, I'm alive, and I'm grateful to our creators and whoever else that I've come through it okay. Special welcome to Harry Miller. It's great to have you on board with us, brother. We seem to be a state of commissioners, and it's good to have a person of prominence and certainly experience and the real core, hard-hitting, community-based experience of Harry Miller is going to be of great value to us as a community in South Australia. So welcome aboard. I've asked Jeremy to come up and assist me with this because I do have a bit of mobility problem with going down like that too much. I don't want to overemphasise that because it sounds like I'm a bloody sook, because I'm not. I try my best to be kind of strong about it. And is laughing at me. She knows something different from back there when I used to be at Wakefield Street maybe. Today I'm going to give you a full update. Firstly, some background, some context, and then to give you the progress to date. And I will say right up front, I think we as Aboriginal people should feel really pleased and I suppose impressed with where things have got to in terms of the whole treaty conversation in South Australia. It's not because of me. I'm simply a facilitator of the process. It is because of the leadership of groups across South Australia, and in particular the groups that have now got to the table. And I know he's already given me some kind of commentary, but people like Candy and Peter Buckskin and so on, we have now jumped ahead of the rest of Australia in terms of where we've got to with the treaty, and I think it's quite a major achievement. It's been an interesting period, and you'll see that there's been some really hard work done. Nevertheless, I think we've got some good runs on the board. There are some downsides to this, and I won't make any apology about those downsides. I'll simply state them as they are. And Candy knows this, and I think Harry will get to know this. When you're appointed a commissioner, you're afforded independence. Sometimes that independence wavers a little bit because you'll get called in and say, well, we don't know that you should be going out there saying these type of things. But if you're people like those of us who have been put in the position of commissioners, we always come back and say, but we are saying this because our community is saying this. All right? And that's the trick to it. That's the, I suppose, the important part about the principle of independence. We are there for our people. That is number one. Right? So there are some downsides, and I'll talk about those in a moment. We will get hard copies of the PowerPoint. We'll get one to you, Candy, and take it from there. And the camera's on now, so if this ends up somewhere, that's okay. Particularly because yesterday in Parliament there was a further scrutiny by the Liberal Party about treaty and how it's going and what have you committed to and how much is it going to cost taxpayers. This kind of stuff is just going on all the time, which for us as Aboriginal people, and certainly not Aboriginal people, we just don't need that as a kind of hump in the road ahead for us. I think anyway. So here we go. You mentioned October, I think it was December, that the Premier and the Minister stood at Parliament House and made an announcement.
Oh, this is my birthday in October.
That's what it was. So in December they announced that they'd like to enter into treaty talks. The important point about that particular statement is to commence talks. It wasn't to come and say, here's what we want you to take on as a treaty. All right, and I'll come to that in a moment. February, they appointed me, and that was a bit of a surprise, a bit of a shock. Came from well and truly left field, and it took me a good week to think about it, because it was going to be a big job. It was going to be a new experience. It was something that none of us have ever kind of had to deal with or consider previously. A lot of us, whether in the academic world or just in Aboriginal business, have had the conversations and talked about treaty, particularly after the demise of ATSI. The Jeff Clark alternative, which is about a treaty and all those sort of things that were around. We, over many years, have seen what happened with the Treaty of Waitangi over in New Zealand. And those of us who have gone further afield have been aware of the historical and certainly contemporary discussions and developments and what's happened in the Canadian experience. So it was a new, interesting challenge for me, and I consulted with people that I hold dear to my heart, and there's three of them that know me better than anybody, because they see me in a different light than my everyday working life, and they expressed a couple of little concerns. It's a little bit to do with where we get to in our kind of careers and our lifelong work efforts, and I think those of us who are in that kind of category know what I'm meaning by that, so I had to have a bit of regard for that. Hence I'm standing up here today holding this a little bit kind of wobbly, but it's all right. So after some deliberation, they supported me, and I went back to the Minister. And going back to the Minister and the Premier, I wanted a couple of understandings to be made very clear and clarified. Firstly, as per that first line, or the second line, my question to government was, did they have a preconceived notion of what a treaty was to them? And they said, no, we don't. We know as much about treaty as what you would probably know, and generally speaking, what the Aboriginal community would probably perceive or understand what a treaty could be. I asked them also whether there was a model that they had in mind, and they said definitely not. And I said, well, I'm pleased to hear that, because if you come to me and said here's a model, then that is a white model, it's not an Aboriginal model, and I wouldn't be interested in the job. So we're able to tick off on those two. There was an outline which could be described as being a proposed strategy of what they had in mind of the time frame. And I'd been given effectively a week or so to consider that before I'd given my response. You didn't have to be a Rhodes Scholar or someone that had high levels of intelligence to see very quickly that the time frame was so disrespectful and so unrealistic. It was with that in mind that I raised that with the Minister and made the point to him that we're starting on the wrong foot to begin with. If you're expecting me to go out and to engage in a meaningful way with Aboriginal people over what effectively was just under a 3-month period and provide you with a report on what their thoughts are on a treaty and a framework for it to progress, then I think you ought to seriously start thinking about getting somebody else. And I don't think you're going to find an Aboriginal person who would want to take that kind of, I suppose, commitment obligation on anyway. there was a sense that there was starting to be a bit of a wobble in the relationship, but it didn't happen like that. But nevertheless, it was sufficient concern to be able to say quite up front, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly. Otherwise, let's not do it at all. I will say to their credit, to Guy Ma's credit, he said, I'll come back to you. That meeting I had with him was on a Thursday. He rang me Friday morning and he said, I'll see you for breakfast on Monday morning. I've got a proposal to put to you. Okay. I remember that day like it was yesterday. We met at Parliament House and he came to me and he offered me another 6 weeks. So, well, 6 weeks is better than what I previously had. And it's certainly a little bit more comfort for me to go and to not get as big a slap from my community as what I originally was going to get. On your behalf, I must say. I was able to push him for another 2 weeks. This is what it was about in terms of some of the downsides to this whole process. There was clearly a political legacy that they were trying to achieve. If Kyle was sitting in the room now, I would say the same words, because it is a fact. It is not a hidden fact, it's not a secret fact, it is a fact. The political legacy is because in March next year we know what's going to happen. And if you then work back from there in terms of the milestones of dates that you then work to, including when the last sitting of Parliament is issued, including when Cabinet can't continue to do its business, so on and so forth. Leave alone the process of engagement and then the process of, through that engagement, the report gave a satisfactory framework to then go to the phase of inviting groups to apply. We were in a very, very tight time frame. I would even say it was an extreme time frame. So I'm giving you this context so you know that it wasn't a straightforward process. It wasn't one that carried the usual regard for respect, appropriate, good, realistic timeframes, and also, for me, in a way that was going to be conducive to the needs of what Aboriginal people out there were saying across this great big state of ours, from metropolitan to regional to remote. Because I made it quite clear that if you want me to do that, that's where I'm going to be going. We landed on effectively 4 and a bit months for me to do the engagement and to come up with a report that was titled, I ended up titling it Talking Treaty, but it also required me to come up with a framework for treaty negotiations. So that's the background. On the 21st of July, I submitted my report. And now I'm going to fill in the dots because Jeremy's waiting to press the next button. I just wanted to be clear that you knew that there was those time pressures and that was the way that was negotiated. My role, and I'll quickly jump through it, conduct broad consultation. I'm starting to get away from the word consultation, I have to say to you. I have a personal preference of engagement. For me, engagement is about coming and saying, I want to engage with you and I'd like you to engage with me. As opposed to, if I say I want to come and consult with you, I'll come and consult with you means I've got something here I want to talk to you about and I want your support for. You can consult with me too, but I'm not sure what it is that you might want to talk to me about. Just a little bit of a tip there for me about the way I see it as far as when we talk to Aboriginal people. I think we've been over-consulted. I think we've got to go that other way now and start saying, how can we make this meaningful for our people? We're coming up with a framework, provide advice to the Minister on a treaty framework. I went into this, and bear in mind, I was appointed, and then they said, well, now you can also have X number of dollars for the staff, which there was $4.4 million over 4 years that was allocated. They gave me the parameters of being able to have an outposted legal person appointed, or at least in the team with me, so I went through the process of selecting that person. And then they gave me one person, which was a captain's choice from the Minister's office. And I say this respectfully to delegates because he was the one that was given to me. They've now taken him back because of where the agenda is now with the election coming up and all those types of things. I'm very lucky I've got Jeremy Johncock as his replacement, and Jeremy went through a merit selection process and he was a successful candidate. And I have a replacement to the senior policy person in Owen Sharp, who was with me. He went back and he's now doing the lithium battery exercise for government, the one that was announced for up in the and he's been replaced by Michelle Hopkins. I think some of you would know Michelle, who's been around our communities for a long time. So that's the team. The legal person's dropped off because we've now gone to a policy framework rather than a legislative, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Facilitate the conversation with the state government and Aboriginal South. That's what I'm doing at the moment, which Candy made some reference to. And lead conversations to define their priority, which is also something that I've been doing. Let's go to the next one. I always put this one up because it helps us to stop and think a little bit about, just beyond what we know is that word treaty, what could it be? And that was the other challenge that I had, because I knew that in all of the communities that I was going to engage with, the level of knowledge or awareness about what some of the specifics of treaty could be was limited. And I don't say that disrespectfully to my people, I say that more as a fact. And that was proven to me with a number of communities, particularly as I went. Well, I won't even say, even here in Adelaide, there were people saying, what is a treaty? What does it mean? They talk about treaty, they talk about New Zealand. What does it actually mean? What do you get out of it? So, some simple terms. It's a legal agreement between two or more parties. In this case, a treaty would be negotiated agreement between South Australian Government and individual Aboriginal groups. And there's the most important thing we must understand, and let's put this right up front. These sets of negotiations are driven by limited powers of the South Australian Government. Treaty, as we all know it, we understand it, and the concept of a treaty, the authority of entering into negotiations from a sovereignty perspective rests with the Commonwealth of Australia. That's just a fact of the Constitution and a fact of the relationship between Australia and the mother country. What South Australian Government is doing is saying we acknowledge that, but we have our own constitution and we are authorised through our own constitution to enter into contracts as we see fit. That's what this is. If the Commonwealth moved to a position, I don't think it's going to happen too soon, or maybe not, to start the discussion about treaty from a national perspective, then what's happened in South Australia will simply bolt onto it, and we'll be in a stronger position than any other state or territory, because we've already got some of the real hard work done. Provided a report to the Minister, extensive engagement, support, being provided by the Crown Solicitor, as I mentioned. We did a lot of research, particularly with the Canadian experience. They, like New Zealand, have got the different forms of both historical, from colonisation, and personally myself, I think the Canadian experience from colonisation is a little bit, I thought, a little bit more detailed and certainly more informative, and gave us, certainly gave me, some better insights than what the Treaty of Waitangi has provided. It's just a personal judgment. So we did a lot of research into what has happened in Canada. I've spoken to colleagues over there from my university days, particularly in Vancouver, where I've got some cultural brothers and sisters from those days. It was just great to talk to them anyway and to get their insights. And I also spoke to some of the First Nations people out in the community, which was good. The Treaty of Waitangi is an interesting one because there were, in talking, I knew this because at some conversations I've been actually to the site where they've got the original copy of the treaty itself, and talking to some of us call them our cousins across the ditch, and they say they still complain these days, well, don't take too much seriously because a lot of stuff in that treaty has never been delivered on. It reminded me a little bit about our the acronym which I used to have a bit of a giggle about back there years ago, which was RICI, the Royal Commission, and all those great big recommendations, and a lot of them hadn't been kind of implemented. So there's a similarity apparently. So we did a lot of research. We also spoke, we had the opportunity to meet with the Attorney General from New Zealand. He was over here for a visit, so we spent a couple of hours with him. And also, as Candy mentioned, the Victorian experience, because they've been doing this for 12 months. They went down the track of going for one treaty for all Koris rather than nation by nation. And it seems as though they got all the nations together, and then there was a number of groups that said, no, we don't agree with that, we don't agree with that, and they all fell over, saying, you're all in or you're all out. And they now regroup. I have to say this here, and not because I have any kind of motivating political reasons to promote it, but the Victorian government's been really great with the amount of money that they've pumped into their treaty stuff. If Clive Maher is going to see this, we need more than $4.4 million for us. So they've done really well as far as the dollars go. The Tauondi Treaty, the report, went in on the 21st of July. In there was a framework. In there was, you'll see, because if you go to DSD website, go to Aboriginal Affairs Reconciliation, and then you just got the drop-down pages where it's now got a very distinct page, which is Treaty Commissioner, or Tauondi Treaty. It'll give you Tauondi Treaty as a click on. You can look at the report, and you'll see all the stuff that we've done there. There are some, I think, really good commentaries in there, which is statements and I suppose views that Aboriginal people from across the state had given to us. So those testimonies are really good. I find them interesting, and they're very, very powerful. Based on the feedback, so based on that, the treaty should be about self-determination. This has been put right up front by the groups as being a core value that's driving why they are seeing treaty as being so important. It's about self-determination. It works towards bringing the utmost importance and significance and the highest level of meaning of what self-determination really should be and has to be. Those who've been at Aboriginal Affairs for most of our working life, and some of us for all of our working life, we throw that around as a catchphrase to say, we want self-determination. And non-Aboriginal people say, and we're doing this because we want you to be in control of your management and your future under self-determination. Well, what we challenge here is what does that mean, and how does it fit for a treaty situation? And that's the real hardcore question that the state of South Australia has been challenged on. How can you make sure that happens so that it's not just a set of words and it's not just a warm and fuzzy feeling that you as non-Aboriginal people and as government give to us because you tick boxes? The independence and the Aboriginal owned and led, and certainly in this agenda it's been led by Aboriginal people. Transparency, this one's really hit hard because there are a lot of our people that have said, we're sick of government coming out and telling us this and giving us all the rhetoric, all the bureaucratic stuff, and A lot of it's a lot of, you know what, hogwash. So they say, we really want the truth to be told about the past wrongs. And I've heard groups in their testimony say, this is not about whitefella bashing. This is not about putting you on a guilt trip. This is about us and how we feel about what has happened to us historically and how we see treaty being a mechanism to help us to not only go through the process of healing but also to reconcile. And that whole notion of reconciliation, Mark, is been right up front all the way through because that's what people are saying and being very passionate about. Everybody informed and up to date. This one also copped a little bit of kind of, I suppose, conversation because people are saying we often get things late or we get things that are outdated or we get things that are told to us later. So we want honesty up front again. Last thing, this was important and this is where I will talk a little bit about what my role has been in terms of this government. This was another pressure point issue. They said, and we'd like to try and lock this whole treaty, South Australian agenda into legislation. So there was some work done with the parliamentary draftsman that myself and Virginia Leake, who was on board with me as an outposted legal person, and the department, Virginia narratives people. And we started drafting what is called enabling legislation. So I wasn't going to have all the details. You know, it was just going to provide a facility through Parliament, through legislation, to enshrine it in legislation, but to empower the minister through Executive Council to enter into and to sign up treaties with Aboriginal people across South Australia. It was simply that. There was a trigger that occurred that I say, and Kyle and I and the Premier, we've talked about this, brought about a change in that way to go. And that trigger was the Leader of the Opposition went public and said if he got elected, he would scrap treaty. If you put that there when that was done, and then the number of days for sitting in Parliament, and when you're moving into the shutdown period, there was a real serious concern and nervousness about getting that legislation through Parliament. And the other factors that I don't want to unpack this too much, but the other factors that occurred was there were some seat changes through the changes that were going on, which changed some of the boundaries and then brought a different kind of percentage in terms of Labor versus Liberal and so on. So I don't get caught up in that stuff. But there was a concern, so what Kyan then made the call to do was we're going to hold off on the legislative approach. So I've still got it in my office, the department's still got it, and he's still got it. That's saying if we get in next year, and that's only when we get it next year, where one of the first pieces of legislation we'll put into both houses of Parliament will be the treaty legislation. So second on whole, it's now in a policy framework, which governments can do every day. So that's the background to that. It needs to be long term, it needs to be ongoing. The difference, as we all know, when you've got it through legislation, it takes 2 hours of Parliament to change it or to get rid of it, rescind it. If you've got policy, you can just go bang like that with a pen and it's gone. That's the difference. That's why we're trying to get it through the legislative framework rather than just policy. We're now in policy, unfortunately. Fairness, equal opportunity for all Aboriginal people. This was about youth, women and elders, besides the rest of the community, but that was the emphasis of what people were saying. We want a strong agenda and regard and input from these different three categories. And not to be rushed. Well, I've told you about the not rush part. We haven't, not a matter of winning, but I think we got as best we could, given the politics and the legacy of that politics. Next one. The approach then through the policy framework has shifted to being nation building, which is the part that I'm now starting to do in 2018, subject to what happens in the election. So there are modules that have been developed with United States University, Canadian groups with Flinders University and Darryl Brigney. I've lined up at least 3 nations that I'll be working with in the new year that will go through those training in terms of nation building. And it's supporting those leaders to build self-governing and sustainable institutions in their communities and how that can be progressed. There is 3 that have already done that in South Australia, including Nottingham. There was a group in Port Augusta and I think the Atla group up in other country. Regional authorities, there are now been 3 that have been in existence for the last 2 years. There is another 3 that have been now recommended for appointment. And that is building the strong governance, which is about the leader to leader. So the leaders from the Aboriginal nation, they meet with the leaders from government on those matters that are related to concerns in your designated area. Nottingham is a good example where their agenda has been about the River Murray and the water system. So the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs, the Minister for Water and Sustainability in Hunter, so they come to the table once every 6 weeks. It's at that level all the time. And then obviously treaty, which is where we're working to now. It's committed for 4 years. Groups will be invited to commence treaties through expression of interest. That happened. So my report, there was 4 main recommendations that were all approved by the Minister, of which the framework was then used to call for the expression of interest. That was put out to all Aboriginal communities and groups across South Australia, and from that process I recommended to the Minister the establishment of a Treaty Advisory Committee. That was a committee that had a very set time frame role, which is to assess, review and to provide a report to the Minister on the expression of interest. And I will say that, without giving the actual numbers, but the numbers of Aboriginal groups and nations that applied to the expression of interest was very, very good. It was outstanding. I was actually quite, what's the word?
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed, there you go. I was overwhelmed and I was very, very pleased and proud to see that the work that we've done has culminated in groups saying, yes, we're ready, even though we may not be ready, we want you to know that we want to be at the table. From that process, there are 3 nations that have now been invited to the table to commence treaty negotiations. There'll be, once again, it's a subject thing to the election, there'll be further expression of interest called in 2018, and we're building up capacity over the next 2 years with my contract remaining, 2 years left, to get as many groups to the table to negotiate treaty over this period. And building the capability of new and existing groups over this time will be required to ensure fair representation of members of the Aboriginal community and meaningful engagement. That's also got to do with, if the Commonwealth finally wake up and say we're going to now do treaty, then we would have had an increased number in terms of South Australian groups that have got to the table to start the treaty negotiation, and it just bolts onto it. That's the way we're seeing it. We had over 600 people come face to face with us across the state over that roughly 4 big months. 280 detailed written submissions and hard copies online and survey responses, which is, it's a lot of stuff, I've got to tell you. Once again, that word overwhelmed, it just completely blew us with the response rate. It was really impressive. 2,000 visits to the website. We set up an active live website pretty quickly. It's still there now and it's been updated. This is a funny one because the young people in the team, they came to me and they wouldn't leave me like this young Dale. And said, you've got to have on Facebook. You've got to. I said, no, because I stay away from Facebook. I've got a couple of ladies in my life who set it up for me, but I never agreed to do it, so it's there anyway. But they'll tell me, you've seen this and you've seen that. I said, no, I don't want to see that. There's too much lateral violence and nastiness for me, so I stay away from it. But they convinced me, and it was probably one of the best things that we did. If you look at the Facebook responses with the young people, it's incredible. It really is. The trick being, it's a one-way conversation. So you can only go in there and it'll take you to the website, and that's where the survey was that gave us the data that we're looking for in terms of demographics, age group, regional, metropolitan, and so on and so forth. 100 mail outs, 700 electronic direct mails. So those direct mails to DSDR to that was quite outstanding to the database. The last one, which was 100,000 recipients of South Australian, a lot of those could well be non-Aboriginal people, but nevertheless it's a big hit. It's a really, really big hit. Right? There's a lot of stuff in there that we actually unpacked and looked at, and you get rid of some of the rubbish in there, but generally speaking, some really good stuff. In the framework report, clearly what the government was saying, we want you to tell us what it's going to take for groups to get to the table to be considered to come and talk treaty with us. So based on Canadian experience, based on the treaty in New Zealand, not just the Waitangi one, because that was a historical one. These were the main kind of, I suppose, elements that came up. And there is more commentary on each of those in the report. For the purpose of the PowerPoint, we're just doing it in a quick summary. Name, treaty aspiration. Treaty aspiration, tell us what you think and believe a treaty is going to do to you that you haven't got so far, type stuff. How organised and established, it's about being incorporated. We've got to comply with all of the governance stuff there. Who the group and nation represents, tell us who they are. The boundaries, there's some overlap still going on if you use the native title approach. How's that going to be addressed? The authority to treat negotiations. This is about mandating. Kaim and I had a bit of a discussion about this because in the first one there was a proposal to say you've got to give us the mandate that you are authorised to come to the table and do the treaty negotiation. We changed that to say get you to the table and then you go and get your mandating. So that's what's happening now. The balanced view, which is once again the youth, the women and the elders. And then the cultural framework. Tell us about your community. Tell us about your group. Tell us about your language and all those types of things. Next. Expression of interest was held. Minister set up the advisory group. Next. And Naranga, Ngarrindjeri and Adnyamathanha are the three that have been invited to the table. There's the Naranga, which was the introductory session. I'll go through it in a moment in terms of showing you what we're doing is we're getting hold of the nations. Each of them have got their own respective flags, so we're putting those up. So I lead the conversation with the groups to define their priorities for the treaty. So I help them and prepare them. And I did that with Candy's group over at Moonta Bay, and that was a good solid 3 and a bit hours. It was good work. I really enjoyed it. Johnsy got into me about not bringing butcher's paper so that we could write up on the wall, but that's another story. Jeremy rushed down to the newsagent and got some, and it kept him happy. So my job is to give the framework of what is going to happen when you get to the table and you start the negotiation, what you're going to prepare yourself for, preamble, what kind of is the basis and the principles of how you want these negotiations to occur. Assist nations to prepare that, including outline the negotiation process. Discuss what your preamble can be in the document. And we took a lot out of the Canadian experience on this because they were really hot on the whole issue of not only just good faith, not only just honesty, but it was about integrity, it was about respect, and it was about making sure that they were coming there in the true meaning of equal partnership. And that's what I think we've been trying to push for, and groups that I've been working with certainly have been aiming that in a very big way. Aims and objectives are how the treaty negotiation is conducted and work as a conduit between groups and nations and government. That's my role that I've been doing. Next one. The introductory session is prepare nations for that. We've done that one. Phase 1. Now, if I just say quickly, Naranga is ahead of everyone. Naranga has now completed Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the negotiations. If you don't know this, I'll tell you now, but all the discussions and outcomes of that has now been put together to sent to Cabinet. So there you go. Ngarrindjeri about Phase 1 only. I don't mean this disrespectfully or implicitly that they have weakened off, but they've stalled in terms of their phase 2. That's been now deferred. ATLA, Adnamatna. 3 weeks ago I did the preparation session with them. Last Friday, which I couldn't make because I was there getting something done, they had their first introductory session, and that was on country and Wilpena. So the preparation sessions are done on country, the choice of the nation. The introductory session, the preparation, then there's the introductory session, and those are done on country also. So that happened on Friday with ATLA. Their first negotiation session is Monday and Tuesday next week. So there are a bunch of people that are going up from the state government, plus myself, subject to this. And that will be a 2-day round 1 negotiation. The second negotiation stage will be done here in Adelaide, because you'll explain in a moment what this involves in terms of structure. Phase 1, headed by a Senior Deputy Executive Officer, assisted by directors, governing agencies. Now, the 2 senior deputies is Alex Reid from BSD and Paul Heathersay from Premier Cabinet. They're the 2 deputies that lead the first round. Right. There are also executive directors or directors of agencies that are directly listed on the nation's interest and aspiration. Give us an example, one for you, because you've done yours.
Fisheries.
Fisheries, there you go. So they raised fisheries. So when it came to the negotiations, the state made sure that there was someone from fisheries there, and certainly when it came to stage 2, the Chief Executive Officer of Fisheries was there. So that's the tiered approach to it. Purpose of the negotiations: establish the key aspirations, priorities of the groups and nations for government to respond to. And they are really hard 2 days, aren't they? They were really heavy stuff. And Narunga's got a very, very good learned lawyer, let me tell you. Can I brag about him?
Yeah.
Tony McAvoy is a senior silk from Sydney. He an Aboriginal fellow, he's one of ours, yeah, you know. I tell you what, if you want to see a guy really do good Aboriginal business, he's the one. He was very good. I think the state went, whoa, gee, we weren't expecting this. That was good. So these negotiations are first between the specific group and the government, and will be represented by agency CEs and deputies or directors. Phase 2. Don Russell was called in by the Premier, because he reports to the Premier since he left ESC and gone over there, and he was asked to lead this. And Don repeats this because he told, I think, your group and other groups. He said to the Premier, well, I can't do this by myself, and I need the support and authorisation of the government to do this. And what the Premier then offered to him was, we will do this as a part of Cabinet, which locks all the government agencies in. So he is there with the authority of Cabinet and the Premier. So whatever negotiations he agrees to carries the highest level of authority besides Cabinet and Ministers of the Parliament. As a senior, he's the most senior public servant. So he's led that. He's accompanied by the 2 deputies, which is Alex and Paul Heathersay. And then the appropriate CE from there. Fisheries is an example. Juna was the other one, Sandy Pitcher. Education, health, families. Families has copped a real kind of bit of a battering, hasn't it? Particularly with child protection stuff. That's been really strong, I think. And there's a message there, I believe. Health has been an interesting one. There's been a lot of push from nations to say, well, we want increase or better control of our health services. So that's been really good. Government agencies to provide responses, so they give the response there. And look, some of these agencies are saying, can I use water?
Yeah.
We all know about water, don't we, over here on the York Peninsula. And there's been an issue for a number of years where the little jetty there was dismantled. So you can't come over there and land at the island unless you pull up on the beach. So there was a discussion by Narungga saying, well, we want this to be part of our treaty negotiation, we want this fixed. The deputy CEO sitting at the table saying, well, we don't need a treaty, we'll do that like that. So he got on his phone straight away and he was sorting it out.
Yeah, which was good because we already went through the process to get a design, put it up to the government committee to make recommendations who recommended no because it was for Narungga sole use.
Yes.
It was wrong.
Yeah.
And so having the deputy CEO there just changed the dynamic.
He didn't need much pushing and funding from Jolene either, I've got to tell you, because he's a really good, genuine guy, that bloke. Yeah. Jolene Thomas sits with the deputy people in those negotiations, both at stage 1 and also stage 2.
Roger, the important thing there was you had people at the table who could say, yes, we can do that.
Absolutely, they had the authority and they had the authority with the resource to do it.
They didn't have to go back and seek permission.
Yeah. Negotiate presented to Cabinet. Well, the Narungga one has now achieved that because they've completed 2 negotiations. They didn't push for a 3rd one. The main structures and principles, all that, kicked off on up in the line here, and all those aspirations. Can I just share with you one that I think it's useful for you to be aware of, and that is the aspiration of what started off as being, and I'll take some responsibility of trying to manoeuvre our community to move away from the term compensation. You throw that word out there to the general public and they get very, very nervous. One of the issues that keeps coming up in Parliament from the Libs is about the cost, which is about compensation. It came up again yesterday. We've been smart about this, and I'll say this to Ken because I think with you guys and certainly Tony and stuff that he's been saying and others, we've shifted that now to a term which is about building a relationship to bring about worthwhile offsets. And those offsets are, what are those things that are happening in that country that non-Aboriginal people and governments have done where they've not afforded Aboriginal community or Aboriginal people the opportunity to get the benefits more than what any other member of the community gets. It's an offsetting approach. And I'll pick on one which is outside of the 3 at the moment, for the purpose of confidentiality. But if you take the Kookaburra up north, right, where my gets to, and you look at the offsets there, we get breadcrumbs from BHP Billiton and the government in terms of those benefits that come from what they're doing to that country, which is our Jubbalbur and our law. And they come there with a big smile and say, aren't you lucky we give you $1.2 million a year from a trust fund that we've set up for you. Be grateful, you black guys. That is a lot of rubbish. You count, and we've done the research on this, the amount of money that they get from their mining industry, right, benefits, and then the state government taxes. It is enormous. They chip the breadcrumbs to us and make us think that we're kind of rich and we're getting a lot of money. We want that relationship to be changed. We want the offsetting calculation to be more realistic and in line with what is commensurate with our rights. Before you came in and started doing that to our country, we enjoyed that. That's the arguments that we're putting forward and saying, we want, if you're going to be serious about this, then this is what we want to know. We're not talking compensation, we're talking about our rights. We're talking about those offsets then that you've done to our country that is intrinsically our right. I've got to say, I think the government has kind of swallowed that one and said, give me your view, you were there.
At first they
didn't know they were nervous at first.
Know what we were talking about.
Yeah. And then I've got to say to their credit, they then brought Treasury and Finance people to the table, brought their CE there, and that's where it just went like a change. So it's not just about getting the right people, you've got to get the genuine and the sincere and the honest ones that are prepared to push government to get out of their comfort zone. Their comfort zone is driven by their response rate that they've got to provide to the taxpayers. and to their constituents. We're saying, that's your business. Our business is to enter into agreements that you will sign into. They'll be subject to come back if you breach it in the Supreme Court. It's contractual law sits there. And that's what we want to now bring to a head. I just thought I'd share that because that one's been around. And there have been some groups, the first thing they say, what about some burner for us? We want compensation. We say, no, you just got to move that one around a bit. Right? I think we're nearly there. We're hoping to get at least one. Carefully kind of picking on this one because I've been absolutely impressed with the way that our other people have gone about their business with these negotiations. We're hoping to get one, if not two, by Christmas. The last sitting of Parliament is about the...
Early December?
Sorry? Early December. We're hoping to get that into Parliament as they sign off. If you look at where we were at the beginning of the year, where we got to the middle of the year, we're now hopefully going to get to at the end of the year, we've made some big inroads. And I feel a real sense of proudness to be part of it and to help the Aboriginal community from where I come. And certainly the support and how we work together as Aboriginal people has been absolutely good. One of the most significant outstanding achievements I think we as Aboriginal people in South Australia. And once again, we're saying we all stand together and we're all proud. Said that, we'll say it in office. So that's it in summary. Thank you for your input in that because you've been there with us.
Yeah,